Embark on an immersive journey through the cosmos at Art Tech House, Houston's original destination for cutting-edge interactive digital art and experiences you won't find anywhere else. Art Tech House is the perfect spring break activity for the whole family, and from March 10th through the 16th, admission for kids is free, while adults can enjoy drink specials all week long at the Art Tech House XR Bar. My daughters loved it, and I can't wait to go back as well. Located in the Heights, just off the MKT Trail, visit arttechhouse.com to learn more and purchase your tickets today. Looking for a fun, safe, and unforgettable summer for your child? Camp Champions has been a top overnight camp since 1967. Located on beautiful Lake LBJ just outside of Austin, they offer exciting activities, the best trained counselors, and a focus on building strong kids. Sessions range from 1 week to 4 weeks, and Camp Champions is open to ages 6 to 17 years old. They're going to help campers grow in confidence, make lasting friendships, and have the highlight of their summer. Summer 2025 kicks off June 1st, so learn more at campchampions.com.
Today on CityCast Houston, it's been another busy week in H-Town. So let's catch up on the news to keep you in the loop. With me today is Monique Welch, who covers diverse communities at the Houston Landing. It's Friday, March 14th. I'm Laura Isensee, filling in for Raheel Ramzanali, and here's what Houston's talking about. Hey, Monique, I got a question for you.
Yeah, hey.
Do you like the Houston Rockets?
I do. This is funny. I just went to their game on Monday, but not really in support of the Rockets. Unfortunately, my husband's an Orlando Magic fan, just from our time living in Tampa, but I occasionally support. I don't dislike them. I should say that.
Okay. Well, then you might be interested in this. Want to invite you to our next community event. It's going to be a pregame mixer at the Houston Rockets on March 25th. They're not going to play the Orlando Magic. They are going to play the Atlanta Hawks. So I don't know if you like the Hawks better than the Rockets, but we're going to have some music, cash bar, and of course, lots of great conversation.
I'm definitely there. And no, I'm rooting for the Rockets this time. So
okay. Well, there's a link in our show notes for you and everyone else listening. We have special discounted tickets with the code CityCast2025. So it's going to be a great time. But let's talk about the news. What's your big story this week? What have you been covering at the Landing?
yeah, well, this one actually is from my colleague, Elena Bress. She's been tracking and really looking into the cancer cluster issues. I'm sure it's not a new story at this point, but it's kind of an evolving one, right? Ever since it was kind of discovered, this issue of creosote in the soil in the greater Fifth Ward area. And so the latest news this week, volunteers with City Council member Letitia Plummer, they hit the streets, knocking door to door and canvassing as part of this kind of multi-year $1.2 million program. And it's an initiative really to offer free cancer screening to all residents. So I love this one. I picked it for my biggest story just because more people need to know like what is actually being done about this really crucial problem in the greater Fifth Ward. And this is how they're trying to inform the community, make sure that no one else, unfortunately, falls victim to cancer because of this issue and kind of tackles those cancer disparities that we have seen disproportionately affect the greater Fifth Ward, which we know is a primarily Black community.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're bringing this one up. For people who don't know, there's a rail yard right there in Greater Fifth Ward that for decades, they used that creosote to treat the railroad ties. And so it's just kind of all seeped into the soil. I actually did some reporting on this a few years ago, looking at that cancer cluster around the rail yard and focusing on the fact that like the childhood leukemia rates are elevated. And it's just so interesting to me that we are seeing something done here that seems preventative, and that it's also really struck me in reading Elena's story that the action is coming from the city council member and a nonprofit, right? Like, it just seems like to do something here, we have to get pretty grassroots and creative. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. No, I mean, from the very beginning, as I've kind of been following this story from multiple outlets, honestly, a lot of people have been covering it, but Elena's been doing a really great job just kind of peeling back the layers. And from the beginning, one thing that stuck with me is the EPA's response, to kind of the initial shock story that was out there. The EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, they began testing soil and the water last year for cancer causing contaminants in the area. But even still, there's been a lot of frustrations boiling over just the testing and the results. And, from there, it kind of is this notion, like you said, it's more grassroots of officials and, community members and nonprofits taking matters into their own hands to address these overwhelming health concerns. And really, it's something that should be, in my opinion, kind of a joint collective effort from the agency that is responsible for
Hmm.
this, right? But unfortunately, we know that's just not always how the cookie crumbles. But what better way than Houston? To me, it's a prime example of Houston taking care of Houston, right? We have the knowledge, we have the awareness now. So what are we going to do about it? And that's exactly what we're seeing.
Yeah, and one more question I was curious, with this cancer screening, like, is it sort of like a multifaceted goal? Like, is it to both check in on people's health, but also gather more data of like what is actually happening on the ground?
Yeah, so it seemed like it's just the beginning of what is going to be again a multi-year initiative, but just kind of the first round of door knocking. They're going to be knocking over like 300 doors
Oh,
in
wow.
the area. So it seems like it's yes, kind of preventative and proactive, but almost like a check-in as well.
Mhm.
With
Mhm.
some of those residents who maybe are already aware of the issue, may have already been exposed, and kind of just get towards future generations as well,
Yeah.
so it seems to kind of have that effect to touch on all of those and catch cancer early, essentially.
Yeah, catching it early is key, so key, and really look forward to seeing what, Elena and the rest of the team uncovers as it goes forward. So I'm going to shift gears. I'm going to share my big story. We've been talking a lot about immigration and Trump's immigration crackdown and how it's playing out in Houston. And it seems like something we can't stop talking about because so much is happening. I mean, we saw the ICE operation in Colony Ridge, which I know your colleagues were all over.
Hmm.
And then we saw this other raid at a manufacturing plant in spring. And then this week, we got news of another really massive operation that started back in late February. And ICE announced that they arrested more than 640 people. But here's what's interesting about this. I mean, obviously, this is important because Houston is a city of immigrants. We're watching this closely, how this crackdown plays out in our community and all the ripple effects. But when you do the numbers, ICE announced that of those 640 or so, 550 people were accused of crimes, right? Going into the Trump administration's pledge to go after those criminal immigrants, as they refer to them. And
Hmm.
of those, there were also 7 gang members. But when you do the math, Monique, that leaves about 100 people who were arrested who don't have ties to any crime that we know of. We don't have a lot of details other than these high level numbers. So, my big question is, I want to know who everybody is, but especially those other 100 people, right? Like, are they
Right.
immigrants who got kind of swept up as collateral damage? Or maybe they are employers who were employing people who did not have authorization. What are your thoughts on this one?
So this has been interesting to see. Unfortunately, I don't think it's the last we'll see of these types of stories and operations, and kind of similar to the Colony Ridge story that my colleagues had, where one of the individuals was just a hardworking business owner. He was the breadwinner in his family, a tire shop owner. His wife described him as a loving grandfather and father and husband. Um, and so while, 500 was roughly 550 of which were accused of crimes, which we can say obviously is the majority, right, of the
Yeah.
total people, um, allegedly in the country without permission. That 100, like you said, that gap, the 100 or so people left, is still a substantial number.
Hmm.
And so it leaves a lot of questions as to, who these people are, right? We're not talking about people who were arrested or convicted of any crimes. So, we can assume that they were probably just working hard to make a living. And so, unfortunately, this is what we may continue to see. And it's heartbreaking.
And here's something else I want to share, like while we're on the topic of immigration. The Trump administration did something else really interesting this week, that they relaunched an app that used to be used by migrants who were applying legally for asylum. But now the app has been completely repurposed and relaunched so that people can self-identify and signal their quote unquote intent to deport. It's been called this Self-Deportation app. Have you seen this or?
Yeah, the rebrand is interesting to me. I remember the first news out there when, he was kind of pulling it. But still, something you mentioned, the lack of
Mhm.
transparency,
Yeah.
does that mean that it's trustworthy now? Like, I just don't know what the back and forth signals.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many questions about that trust and what is this data going to be used for? Because when they were using it for the asylum applications, I mean, people would scan passports, scan their face, have a lot of information on family status. So privacy experts are asking, are they now going to be using it for surveillance? Also, one of the leading immigration advocates here in town, Cesar Espinosa with Fiel, he was saying that this self-deportation app, it really doesn't make sense because on the one hand, you have the Trump administration saying, oh, if you sign up and register, then you can leave and then you'll be free to return at a later date. But what Espinosa told a local TV station is that there's already a law on the books that says if you leave when you're here illegally, then you are barred from coming back. So it's kind of like, what is actually going on? Is there sort of a false promise being offered that's not true?
Yeah, I mean, there's already so much fear, and just put yourself in their shoes, right? I don't know if there's something I could trust, right? And kind of how it's being kind of dangled. Like,
Hmm.
these are people's lives we're talking about, and it's kind of being used, like you said, for PR purposes. And but the real impact we know is going to be so much greater.
Yeah, and we'll be sure to be covering that impact and all these ripple effects in Houston's communities.
Grab your cowboy hats and get ready to kick up your heels because Bryan, Texas is the place to be on May 17th for the Troubadour Festival. There's only one festival that brings the best of country music to life with chart-topping artists and delicious Texas barbecue, all in one location. The Troubadour Festival has an impressive musical lineup headlined by Shane Smith and the Saints and features artists like Randy Rogers and Wade Bowen, just to name a few. Now, if those great acts weren't enough, the Troubadour Festival will also have over 25 Texas barbecue joints, 3 of which were just recognized by the Michelin Guide, dishing out that signature smoky, mouth-watering Texas barbecue all day long. That right there is worth the price of admission for me. And check this out, on Friday, May 16th, there's going to be an official Troubadour Festival pre-party in historic downtown Bryan at the Palace Theater. This event is free and features local Texas musicians like the Wilder Blue, the Drop Tines, and Jerry Alvarez. Get your tickets now to the Troubadour Festival on May 17th and plan your visit at destinationbryan.com. Trust me when I say this, you've never experienced anything like Meow Wolf before, and nothing I say is going to prepare you for just how incredible Meow Wolf radio tape is, but I'll try. You start by walking into a community radio station, and from there, ordinary objects take you into a mind-bending world where art, sound, and storytelling collide. I mean, over 60 local artists have helped create this experience, and there's truly nothing like it. The best part, Meow Wolf is fun for everyone, and it's why I recommend it to all of my friends and family, and now you. Plus, there's always something new and dynamic happening there, so you can make it a daytime adventure or an adult-only evening. Experience why I always leave Meow Wolf with a creative buzz and an appreciation for the out of the ordinary by buying your tickets at meowwolf.com/visit/Houston. One final tip, don't look at pictures online of what Meow Wolf has in store. Just go in and be ready to have your frequency changed.
Let's get to our overlooked stories. Monique, what's a story that you think people may have missed but should know about?
Yeah, for sure. So I published a story earlier this week, and I've been looking into a lot of concerns over the last year or so, really, at the Metropolitan Multi-Service Center. For those of you who may not know, it's the city's only adaptive recreation center. In the last several months, there have been some concerns rising about security. And, adaptive recreation center implies it's a space that is primarily used to cater to people with disabilities. And in Houston, that population is rather large. It's hundreds of thousands of people in Houston with disability.
Hmm.
So I started attending these Houston Commission on Disability meetings, and there was a woman by the name of Eileen Edmonds who works with the Theater Under the Stars. They're an arts program that promotes young children and students with disabilities.
Yeah.
She regularly attends the center and has education programming and classes, particularly on the weekends. The weekends are a little slow, but she's noticed lately there's been an uptick in kind of concerns. And it's primarily after talking to her and other parents and individuals from programming there, and even city officials have all said that a lot of it has to do somewhat with the uptick of the unhoused kind of frequent the facility.
Hmm.
She's witnessed instances of loitering, overnight camping on the facility grounds, some users being harassed, public sexual activity, you
Oh,
name
wow.
it. And so in the last year, they've kind of seen some more activity in it. And
Hmm.
this is a vulnerable community, people with disabilities who many argue in the story may not easily be able to defend themselves in the event of harm. And so the story just kind of looks at all of the history and the journey of these complaints. They started at this smaller kind of Houston Commission on Disabilities, which really is like the city council, in short, for people with disabilities. There are a lot of
Oh,
leaders
wow.
within the community space. They help advocate, and their role really is to make recommendations both internally to city departments and the mayor, and even some externally as well. So the complaint started there. Nothing was done. They were kind of ignored. And then users got tired of it, residents, and so they went to city council and brought them before the mayor
Okay.
and council member Abby Kamen. And from there, they started to take them a little seriously.
So this center, the Metropolitan Multi-Service Center, I think I know this one as the West Gray voting location.
Yes.
It's one of the most popular places to vote in Houston when it's election season. I didn't know about this adaptive recreation center. That's such a cool program.
And honestly, you're probably not alone in that, Laura. A lot of people mainly know this center as one of the largest voting centers in the county. And this past election season, I think they were like the second highest
Hmm.
voting center. And that's a trend that we've seen year after year. But in the story, a lot of people said that they would see this uptick around voting season. And HPD even started upping their patrols just because of it being an election year.
Yeah.
The facility was also a warming center overnight. We had cold weather a few months ago. So the center it's multi-purpose, right? It is used for a lot
Yes.
of different reasons, but it's primarily day-to-day function is as kind of a rehabilitation center. There are a lot of people who get rehab training there. They use it for fitness and exercise kind of after their rehab at Tier.
Wow.
And so
Yeah.
it's used for that purpose.
I'm wondering if it looks like the city is going to step up and maybe pay for some more security. And also, another thing that struck me reading through your story is this kind of a sign of things to come with our city budget that is very strained? I mean, they're trying to close a huge budget shortfall for next
Right.
year, $330 million. And, from what I read in your story, that part of the reason that this situation has come up is that they used to have some security there, but that got cut
Mhm.
several years ago under Mayor Anise Parker when there was another budget crisis. So I'm wondering, both for this particular center, but then also other community centers, other parks. I mean, is this kind of a sign of things to come when you have a really strained budget?
Yes and no. I mean, that funding has always been the biggest problem whenever it comes to um, anything in the city, right? We all know it's no secret there is a huge deficit, and the city is currently working to eradicate that. But there's inflation. When they did have security years and years ago, it was roughly 50K. Now, of course, their estimate it could cost anywhere from 115 to upward of
Oh, wow.
$120,000. But still, when you take that in context,
100% inflation.
right? When you still take that into context, a lot of people are like, well, this is Houston. This is the fourth largest city in the world, right? But you have city officials that said they just can't prioritize this one facility over another. And so
Mm,
how do they get around that, right? So they said, okay, we're going to start upping patrols with park rangers. We're going to have them frequent the facility, do more patrols. We're going to tap our partners at Houston Police Department if further escalation is needed and kind of rely on their staff. The only problem there, of course, is park rangers are unarmed, right? And so, in kind of an immediate situation, you're kind of relying on staff who may not always be trained to handle
hmm
all incidents, right?
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
always going to be a matter of funding, but for now, their best way is trying to figure out how they can work around through their park rangers and through HPD.
HPD. Well, I'm going to take us from West Gray and we're going to go a little east over to the George R. Brown
Yeah.
Convention Center for my Overlook story because we saw this
Hmm.
big reveal of plans. They have this multi-billion-dollar upgrade of the George R. Brown Convention Center. It's going to be very fancy, pedestrian plaza, connect with the Toyota Center. But now there's always these unintended
Of
consequences
course.
or things people might have missed when they were planning. And here's what is happening over there, that residents just east of the convention center in the East End, they are saying they have been completely left out of the process, and the current expansion plans would cut off a street, Polk Street, that it's really critical for them to get into downtown safely, both by walking, driving, cycling. And so I think this is a really overlooked story, because I didn't know we were about to spend billions of dollars on updating the convention center. That kind of blew by me. Um,
Yeah.
but also, I'm really curious to see how this plays out for the residents in the East End. The street in question is Polk Street, and I don't know if you've been on it, but I used to take it all the time when I worked at University of Houston, and I would go into downtown. It's the one that has an underpass because there's, of course, railroad tracks in Houston,
Hmm.
and the other streets that go east-west, you have to cross the railroad tracks. But at Polk, you can
Hmm.
go underneath. So it's this straight shot from the East End into downtown. And while Houston First, the tourism and marketing arm of the city, they're saying, well, yes, we're going to close off Polk, but we're going to do these other things to create more connectivity, like covering up the freeways with these caps and green spaces. But for residents in the East End, they're saying, don't take away what we have that works. And so there's going to be a big community meeting on Monday. It's the first one that's actually open to the public at the EB Cape Center on Leland. I'll put the link in the show notes. But um, I'm really interested how this one plays out, because I would think you would want that connectivity. You would want people to be able to drive safely, walk safely, bike safely from the East End, which is growing, to this new revamped space in downtown. I mean, it just seems obvious to me. I'm not quite sure what I'm missing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't live in the East End. I frequently drive through there and it never fails. I don't frequent there often, but every time I do, I'm stopped by a train. And I have some colleagues who live in East End and they're always complaining about the stopped trains. And it seems like Polk Street is the only kind of workaround and the only lifeline to kind of circumvent some of that. So to me,
Hmm.
it doesn't really make sense to kind of cut off that access. And I'm like you. I
Yeah.
was honestly a little surprised just to hear about the expansion. of the convention center. One, because, just going there, it doesn't look like a place that needs to be either renovated or expanded to me. I've
Yeah.
always kind of regarded the convention center as in tip-top shape compared to a lot of city buildings.
Yeah.
Houston is kind of an old city in that regard, and a lot of its buildings show that. So the George R. Brown Convention Center is not one that was at the top of my list of needing that.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't know that was kind of in the works, but, there are going to be some really key dates to see how this plays out over the next couple of weeks. Because right now people can put in public comments of what they think about this. And then the city will be voting. Like, basically, do we give this street over to Houston First and building the expanding the convention center and let them close it off? Or are we going to do something different? So we will be following up on this.
The Texas coast is special to me, and it's always calling me. My family has made countless memories there, and just off the Texas coast sits a unique beach town marked with salty vibes and sun-soaked memories, Port Aransas. It's a place where family traditions naturally unfold, and you'll find beauty in the island views while taking time to relax between adventures. And with 18 miles of shoreline, there are plenty of adventures, from kayaking with the kids to fishing off the coast or simply cruising down the beach in a golf cart, soaking in the sounds of the Texas coast. That sounds wonderful. Start planning your getaway now with your friends and family, because there's nothing like having multiple generations under one roof so everyone can enjoy those perfect beachfront mornings and that cool Gulf breeze in the evening. So many Texans have anchored their traditions to the island life in Port Aransas, and with one visit, you'll see why. Start your new favorite family tradition in Port Aransas, Texas. Plan your visit to Houston's beach at visitportaransas.com. I love the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo, but parking at the rodeo is a hassle. So here's a tip to make your trip there stress-free. All you need to do is make downtown Houston your starting point and jump on the Metro's Red Line, aka the Rodeo Rail. It's so much easier than driving around in traffic by NRG Stadium looking for that perfect parking spot. And make the experience even better by coming to downtown early and exploring what downtown Houston has to offer. From getting a bite at world-class restaurants to grabbing a drink at one of the many hotspots. While you're there, you'll find really helpful Texas-sized rodeo signs guiding you to the nearest light rail where you jump on the red line. And if that's not enough, there's even going to be pop-up rodeo performances along the rodeo rail featuring live music with the next generation of rodeo superstars. To learn more about getting to the rodeo from downtown, text Downtown Rodeo to 56512. That's Downtown Rodeo to 56512. Downtown Houston is H-Town's original neighborhood, and now it's your starting point for the rodeo. Downtown Houston, get energized and revived.
Monique, let's wrap it up with a moment of joy. What is bringing a smile to your face this week?
Honestly, it's kind of still a piggyback from last week. I had a chance to go to Black Heritage Night at the Houston Rodeo, which is one of my favorite
Okay.
events ever to go to. And I took the day off, which was great. It was on a Friday. Just kind of, was able to let my hair down. Me and my husband went to Bun B show, which is almost kind of becoming like too big for Houston. I have a lot of thoughts about that, but
Oh, really?
yeah, there was a lot of talk about people from flying out of town to come,
Oh.
and it's kind of getting a national appeal, it seems like. So I don't know what this means for the future, but, for us Houstonians here, kind of, been going routinely year after year, it is something to look forward to for sure. So I enjoy that. And I just love rodeo season in general. All the episodes that you all have had. It's my favorite time of the year to be a Houstonian.
Oh, well, I'm right there with you because the rodeo is also my moment of joy this week. I haven't been yet, but me and my crew, we're going to meet up with some of my siblings and the cousins. We're basically starting this new family tradition of like cousin day at the rodeo.
Oh, I
Really
love
more
it.
like the livestock show where we see the bunnies and the little pigs and pet the goats and then wash our hands very, very well. Um,
Please do.
but yeah, we're gonna hit up the rodeo this weekend, and I'm really looking forward to it. And like you said, just riding those waves and feeling a part of this city. This is our signature event.
Yeah, that's awesome. Are you going to check out any of the performers at any point?
Not currently. Little hard to get out for date night with my two little ones. But maybe next year we'll make it happen. But there's so much to do. There's so many different things to the rodeo that we're gonna soak it up. So here's to the rodeo. Monique, thank you so much for joining us as always. We always appreciate you and the work that you and your colleagues at the Houston Landing do.
Thanks so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to hang out with you guys.
That was Monique Welch, who covers diverse communities at the Houston Landing. If you enjoyed this episode, please text it to 3 friends who love the rodeo like us. And take a moment and give us a rating and review. It's really the best way for us to grow the show. And if you want even more news from Houston and tips on where to go around town, then subscribe to our daily newsletter, Hey Houston. That link is in our show notes along with all the stories we talked about today. That will do it for this week here on CityCast Houston. Our newsletter editors were Natalia Aldana, Francisco Kilgore, Brooke Lewis, and Selena Sae Reynolds. Our producer is Carleon Jones. Our host is Raheel Ramzanali, and I'm your executive producer, Laura Isensee. Our music is by the band All the Kimonos, and we'll be back on Monday with a look at how DEI has become a taboo topic and what that means for Houston.